Okay, you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia on Comcast Channel 66 and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Priyanka Reyes-Cara, the K-12 Education Policy Director for Children First, to discuss Senate Bill 795, which would increase funding for school vouchers in Pennsylvania. Lance Haber will report on the city tax structure, and Denise Clay Murray will join us from Brooklyn, live from Brooklyn, where she is accepting Hall Monitor's Hometown News Award. Lance, how are you tonight?
I'm all right. Unfortunately, as you mentioned while we were getting ready for this show, the air quality in Philadelphia is unacceptable, and SEPTA still isn't free.
Yeah, two things. On the first, we just received this about an hour and a half ago. This is from the Ready Philadelphia, from the Philadelphia city government. The city of Philadelphia is currently under a code red fine particles action day alert. This alert means that the air is unhealthy to breathe, and some members of the general public may experience health effects. Members of sensitive groups may experience more serious health effects. Air quality may vary throughout the city and throughout the day, with some areas having significantly worse quality, depending on the prevailing winds. The health department is hopeful that this latest air quality event will end soon, but forecasting air quality due to wildfire smoke is difficult. The city is committed to providing regular updates on the situation and helping staff and residents stay safe. So at least for the time being, we are under, again, a code red fine particles action alert. So if you can stay in, and be checking the city's website to see when this will be lifted and when things will improve.
So you missed the pitch, Larry. Stay in, watch us, send us an email, and let us know what you think. And by the way, if you've got extra time, send an email to SEPTA. Tell them on days when the air quality is unacceptable, they should be free. Get everybody out of their cars. Let's clean the air by having everyone ride SEPTA.
That's right. So one of the things we're going to talk about tonight, the state budget is not finalized yet, and it doesn't seem like I've been told it might not be before the end of the weekend, to tell you the truth. So we're not sure about what's going to happen with that yet. But one of the big issues that we always seem to be talking about on the show, and everybody seems to be talking about, is school funding. Now, we know that was a couple months ago, Commonwealth Court said the state funding formula was unfair. It didn't exactly give a prescribed remedy to fix this, but it is unfair, and that has been acknowledged and it needs to be changed. One of the other major issues that we've been following and that has been an issue for quite a long time is the idea of vouchers. And we're going to talk a little bit about what vouchers are in a minute. But right now, going through the state Senate is a bill that would increase funding for vouchers. And basically that means if you wanted to go to a private school or had send your child to a private school, the state would subsidize that with a voucher. So it could, it would defray the cost, or in some cases maybe eliminate the cost using state money. This is another issue, another concern, because it takes money away from public education, much like charter schools. The city of Philadelphia spends about a third of their education budget on charter schools. And this has been one of the reasons why we can talk about a school district that is underfunded. Vouchers are another way, another issue that creates an imbalance when we're talking about funding. And there's all other issues with this too that we're going to get into. So we have a couple of videos that we want to play. This first one, the audio quality might not be great, so we're going to let it play for a little bit to see what happens. But this is the president of the Philadelphia Teachers Union, Jerry Jordan, speaking in Harrisburg yesterday, talking about what the issues with this bill and what some of the problems could be. So here's Jerry Jordan yesterday in the state cabinet.
Us to all remember critical day of February that set us on a new, better path forward for all our young people. On February 7th, 2023, Judge Renee Jubileer ruled definitively on an issue that those of us who have been in this fight for a while know in our bones. The way we fund public education in this Commonwealth is unconstitutional, it is immoral. And Judge Jubileer has now, with finality, ordered executive and legislative branches of government to address this decades-long system of neglect. So it's a lot troublesome to me. To our 13,000 members, to the advocates standing here today, and to all who care deeply about the future of public education in our great Commonwealth, that we would be standing here once again to rally against a voucher scheme that would siphon money from public education. It is outrageous to think that instead of moving full steam ahead with the urgency that this moment requires, there are voucher bills floating about the legislature. Bills that actually take money from public education rather than adhere to Judge Jubileer's ruling. So let me just remind us all what vouchers do not do. Vouchers do not reinvest in a system of public education that for decades has been underfunded. Vouchers do not provide desperately needed resources for all students across the Commonwealth, regardless of their race, their gender identity, their religion, or their disability. Vouchers do not remediate the toxic school buildings that are quite literally poisoning our young people. Vouchers do not actually address student outcomes and achievement. And vouchers certainly do not address the inequities in school funding that they are purported to address. I could go on, but let me tell you just some of what vouchers do. Voucher programs often discriminate against students based on myriad factors. Vouchers go half the time to students whose families earn more than $200,000 per year. Vouchers go a majority of the time to students who would already be attending private schools. And vouchers do unequivocally wreak havoc on school districts and decimate public education. The research is clear on this. It is incumbent upon every lawmaker in our great Commonwealth, every state representative, every state senator, and Governor Josh Shapiro, to double down on their commitment to enacting what Judge Jubileer ordered on February 7th. It is time to fully fund public education in Pennsylvania, not only because the judge ordered it so, but because our children and educators need and deserve it. This is the future for our children, our grandchildren, and every Pennsylvania resident. I thank you.
Right, and that was Jerry Jordan, the president of the Philadelphia Teachers Union, speaking about what vouchers are. If you listen closely, you can hear it. I know the audio quality there wasn't great, but we're going to take a quick diversion from this and bring in Denise Clay Murray, who is reporting live from Brooklyn, New York. Denise, there she is.
Hi, everybody.
How is Brooklyn treating you?
Well, I made it to the Brick Arts Media Building where they're having the Hometown Media Awards tonight. But one thing I have learned is that if you need directions in New York, it's better to just rely on Google Maps, because almost everybody I asked for directions said, I don't know, I don't live here, so I can't help you. I ended up getting directions here from the TD Bank up the street. That just tells you how much fun this has been in a way.
Okay. Well, you are up in Brooklyn accepting Hall Monitor's Hometown Media Award. We have won the Democracy in Action Award.
Mhm.
And that encompasses programs that cover national, state, or local elections, including interviews, commentary, debates, and candidates. And we won this for an election night special we did last year, I believe is what happened. So, and I still don't know how we were nominated. I have not figured that out yet. But we're glad we were. And we are very glad that you're accepting this award on our behalf.
Well, I'm honored to do so because, this is as much about the people who watch this show and listen to this show on a regular basis as it is us. Because if it weren't for you all, taking the time to listen to Hall Monitor and to read our newsletters and to do all of that, I don't think that anyone would know enough about us to nominate us for an award. So this is as much for the listeners and readers of Hall Monitor and the viewers as it is for us. And we really appreciate all of the support that you have given us over the last few years that got us to this moment where I'm hanging out in one of New York's 5 boroughs, getting ready to go in and talk to some people who are doing community media, which is what we do here. And what makes this important, particularly the fact that we're winning the award that we're winning, is the fact that in some ways, Philadelphia is what's known as a news desert, meaning that there isn't enough coverage of certain things going on and certain communities going on, and a lot gets missed. And the fact that, the Alliance for Community Media is a group of people that sees this problem and is trying to fix it is really important.
And, one of the, oh, go ahead, Lance. I'm sorry.
Thanks for going to Brooklyn, the 4th largest city in America.
Yes. Thank you.
One of the things that you had mentioned that I think is really, really important about this is being able to speak to other people who are doing similar things in other parts of the country, because this is a national organization, and there's a lot of good work that's going on all over the place that is getting recognized here, and I think that's really, really important.
It is because sometimes you feel like you're doing this in a vacuum, that no one's really seeing it, that not everybody is showing it any attention. And then you come to an event like this where not only are you finding out that you're not in a vacuum, but that a lot of people are paying attention. And that's really important.
And, it's, and like you said, Denise, the success we've had is because people listen and watch and tell us what they need and what is concerning them, and that's what we go out and try to find. And then based on those things, we try to find other things that our audience is interested in and could be useful to them. And that's what the show has been all about. And all the people who listen and watch and read our newsletters, we can't thank them enough for entrusting us with that.
Exactly. I had to move because it's starting to rain. And I'm outside getting ready to go into the reception. But next week, I'll have something a little more in depth about my experience with the Alliance for Community Media, and get a little bit more information on what they do. So that way our listeners can get that information too.
Well, that sounds great. And Denise, thank you so much for representing us out there. And have a good time. Because my understanding is the cocktail hour is an hour and 45 minutes before the ceremony starts. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And any cocktail hour that's an hour and 45 minutes long is going to be interesting.
Oh, go ahead, Lance.
I just said have fun, Denise.
I will. I will.
Well, thank you so much, Denise, and we'll look forward to hearing more about this next week on the show.
You and you guys again. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, and thank you for letting me come here to Brooklyn and check out this award show, and also to find out, how much better I have gotten over the years in being able to lead myself places, because here you kind of have to.
Right, and don't tell anyone in Brooklyn how low the rents are in Philadelphia. We already
I
have
won't.
we already have
won't.
enough people transplanting.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to keep that to myself.
All right. Well, Denise, you have a good time,
Well,
and we will see you next week on the show.
Definitely.
All right. Denise Clay Murray reporting live from Brooklyn at the Hometown Media Awards, accepting Hall Monitor's Award for Democracy in Action. So thank you to Denise for doing that. So now we'll get back to our coverage of this, of the voucher proposal. So we interviewed Priyanka Reyes-Kara of the Children First organization, and she does kindergarten and 12th grade education policy. So she's going to walk us through a little bit about what vouchers are, what the issues are with this particular bill, and answer some questions for us. So here is our interview with Priyanka Reyes-Kara, Policy Director for Children First. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Children First?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. So my name is Priyanka Reyes-Kara, K-12 Policy Director at Children First. I am a former teacher, and I care deeply about making sure our public school system is equitable, meaning that it serves all students, including students who live in poverty, students of all racial backgrounds, students with disabilities, students of all orientations and lifestyles and backgrounds. And so that is my passion. Children First is a children's organization that advocates for not only K through 12 education, but also early childhood education, children's health, and juvenile justice as well. And so we believe in doing everything we can at the state and local level to improve the lives of children in the Philadelphia region and statewide.
And right now, one of the things that we're going to talk about here is this voucher bill that is going through the Senate, the state Senate. But before we get to that, I think when people hear that, they hear the term vouchers often, but maybe they don't have exactly a clear idea what that really means. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So vouchers are this idea and this program that allows some sort of funds to be used by families to take their child out of a public school and instead provide funding so that they can attend a private school. They can come in all different flavors. In fact, there's already one voucher program in Pennsylvania called EITC OSTC, and that's a tax credit form of a voucher. It's currently funded at a level of $340 million in Pennsylvania. Now, right now, there's another type of voucher program on the table, which is being called Lifeline scholarships. It's another voucher that would take money directly from the state and put it towards voucher programs, so that state money that would have otherwise gone to something else, possibly towards public education, will be redirected so that families can use it to send their children to private school.
And how do vouchers affect Philadelphia?
Well, vouchers affect Philadelphia and all other school districts that have schools that qualify for the voucher program. So the way that the language of the bill is written, the bottom 15% of the most underperforming schools in the state are the ones that qualify for the voucher program. And under that definition, most schools in Philadelphia would apply. And that means that if a child lives in the area of one of those schools, which, as we know, are also schools that are underfunded, that have been historically underserved by the state and by local funding schemes. If a child is in the catchment zone of one of those schools, they would be eligible to receive a voucher. And what that means on a large scale is something that I'm really concerned about, because as we know, the way that schools are funded across Pennsylvania and other states as well is on a per pupil basis. So for every child that attends a school district, the district receives funding to educate that child. And when a child leaves the school district, whether it's through a voucher, through moving, through attending a charter school or another type of a non-traditional public school, the funding also leaves with them. But the rest of the children who are still in that school or in that district, they're still there, but they now have a smaller amount of money left to educate them, where some of the costs have not changed at all. So things like fixing school buildings that are affected by asbestos and lead and other facilities issues, those problems are still there, are just as expensive, but with a voucher program in effect, the district will have less of that pot of money to educate and to take care of those issues.
So how does something like Senate Bill 795 become a thought that the legislature wants to put through? Why? What is the genesis of something like this?
Well, there are foundations and politicians that are behind this idea of a voucher program. It is something that will help students who already attend private schools or folks who believe in attending private schools. How did it come into being? It's a harder question, but personally, I think that the reason that it's gaining popularity right now is because it's a somewhat cheaper solution to the bigger problem that we have, which is really redesigning the way we fund public education in Pennsylvania. In just February of this year, the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court ruled that our whole statewide funding system for education is unconstitutional. And so now we're seeing that new ideas like privatization through vouchers are gaining more popularity, because for some that is a more palatable idea. But the problem with that is it won't fix the root problem, which is that our public school funding system is broken. And 9 out of 10 students in Pennsylvania attend public schools. So pulling a few out to attend private schools won't solve the problem for all.
And I'd like to bring Denise here.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you for joining us. I guess my question is, in light of the Commonwealth Court decision, has anybody talked about the fact that this can be seen to some as a means of getting around that decision? Is that one of the issues that opponents of this program have with it?
So there's a little bit of misinformation, and the language of the bill is technical, so it's hard for some people to fully understand what this is. The Commonwealth Court decision, it is specifically about our public school funding system. And so a program like vouchers or Lifeline, whatever you want to call it, that addresses private education simply doesn't, it's not a solution to the problem that was brought up by the court. Whether it's getting around it or simply not addressing it, it depends on how you look at that.
Okay, now I've covered voucher programs in other cities, places like Milwaukee and in parts of Florida. And one thing that has been an issue is that the very people that they want to give these vouchers to, when they try to take them to certain places, the vouchers are not being accepted because, for a variety of reasons. Is that a part of this bill? I mean, does this bill address the fact that, if you get this private school voucher, the private school that you want to go to has to take it?
No. My understanding is that private schools have the ability to, they're private. They're not regulated in terms of who they accept for admissions. So in other states, we've seen issues like private schools not accepting LGBTQ kids, for example, or students who have certain disabilities. There is a lot more discretion in admissions when you look at private schools. Those things are regulated in our public school laws that require schools to serve all students. And then the other thing is the private school voucher will not cover the full cost of tuition at every private school. And so it might seem like an opportunity to attend a private school, but it may in effect create a bigger financial burden for a parent for whom the private school tuition covers only a small portion of tuition for the school of their choice.
Now, where does this bill actually stand in terms of the budget allocations? Because I've been on Twitter and I've seen various legislators saying there's no way I'm voting for this. There's no way I'm going to support this. What are you hearing in terms of whether or not this is going to make it into the budget? And if you are hearing it's going to make it into the budget, what can citizens who don't want this to happen, who don't think that public money should be going potentially to religious institutions, do to keep that from happening?
Absolutely. So we are really in the midst of budget season right now. Negotiations are ongoing. Lifeline scholarships, from what I've heard, are on the table because there is some support, especially in the Senate. However, no decisions have been made, and it's a great time for lawmakers to hear from their citizens about why citizens and families and parents do not think this is the right choice. So I urge anyone who's watching this who is not in favor of the Lifeline Scholarship Program to contact their lawmaker and tell them why it is that you think this is a bad idea and why this is the wrong time to privatize and the right time to invest in our public education system.
Now, when Josh Shapiro ran for governor, one of the biggest groups of people that gave him an endorsement were the teachers' unions. Mm-hmm. What are you hearing from them on this?
Well, teachers' unions are in staunch opposition to any form of voucher program. In fact, just yesterday, my organization, Children First, along with our statewide coalition, PA Schools Work, stood with PSEA and AFT. Those are the two big teachers unions in Pennsylvania. And we all came together to say vouchers are not the solution that we need right now. The unions are in staunch opposition to this because their membership are advocates, and they are the people who are on the ground in public schools educating the state's children. They're educating our future, and they know that something like a voucher bill is a distraction. And furthermore, there's just no way for a voucher program to exist without taking funds away from public education. That's one thing that I really want to clarify, because the unions are saying it, we as advocates are saying it, but there's some on the pro voucher side who are saying this is a pot of funds that does not detract from public education. That's simply not true, because for every child who attends a private school through a voucher, they are leaving their school district, and the school district has that much less funding to serve the rest of the students. This Lifeline bill in particular is dangerous because it's state money that could otherwise be, and it's $100 million that could otherwise be put into public education.
Okay, thank you for joining us. And I'm going to give you back to my co-host, Larry McGlynn, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right, thank you, Denise. Before we let you go, can you tell us where we can learn more about Senate Bill 795?
Sure, we have, and I will be happy to share links afterwards as well. You can you can watch our recent press conference from yesterday where the teachers unions spoke out, as well as advocates. That's up on YouTube. You can view our Facebook page for the PA Schools Work Coalition. We also have a memo on the PA Schools Work statewide coalition that explains more about vouchers.
And where can people learn more about your work with Children First?
childrenfirstpa.org.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
All right. We would like to thank Priyanka Reyes-Cora for joining us here, and we'd like to thank Children First for making her available to us to explain what is happening with this voucher situation in Harrisburg and how it could affect Philadelphia and the entire state. Now, Lance, we just passed, while the state is still having their budget issues and hasn't passed one yet, we have passed one here in Philadelphia. And amongst other things, and there's a lot in this budget that we're going to be talking about for weeks, really, I think, including this weekend, this Friday's newsletter, where we talk a little bit about budget and a little bit about legislation, highlights of legislation that was passed in this session. One of the things that happened is the tax rates were adjusted, and this has become. I don't always like using the word controversial, but that's really what it is, because you have council members who disagreed with this and have been vocal about that. Tell us a little bit about what's happening here.
Well, thank you. And great interview about the voucher program. I think one of the things that often doesn't get said is when you have a voucher program, it forces people like me who pay my taxes to fund schools that teach people that Jewish people like myself killed the Lord. And I resent that. I resent the idea that my tax dollars are going to private schools that teach things such as slavery didn't exist, or that Jews killed the Lord, or that something else happened that simply isn't true. And I hope as we start the discussion about why a voucher program not only takes money away from the public schools, but tears the social fabric, tears our understanding of the world, and opens the door for people like Moms of Liberty to censor books, to stop people from understanding the world, to stop people from studying evolution and forcing kids to study creationism. So I think that's an incredibly powerful story that we're telling, and I'm really thankful that we got the interviews on, and I'm hoping our listeners will dig a little deeper. If you want a school system that's going to teach what we understand to be the truth to the next generation, we can't have a voucher program that will fund schools that don't tell the truth. What's going on in Florida is horrible. When they start saying that the country was not built on slavery, was not built on racism, we are breaking the social fabric and misleading the next generation. And
what you just said, I endorse 100%, and you said it eloquently, and I think that's really what's at stake here. This is a very, very important issue. So going back to the city budget, it's a little tricky because a big part of the city budget is the state budget. And as you mentioned earlier, the state budget isn't done, and the state of Pennsylvania is sitting on a tremendous amount of the COVID cash. And we're not sure exactly how that's going to be used. We saw an example of how that type of funding can be used to fix I-95 in a very short period of time. It's a shame we don't have the same incentive to use that money to fix the school systems in this very short period of time. It's kind of hard to believe that we know how to fix a road, but we don't know how to take asbestos out of schools or fix the heating or air conditioning system. That being said, when the city passes a budget, there's really four parts to it, right? We're not going to talk about the school funding. We've already spoken a little bit about that. But from the city's point of view, there is the operating budget, which is what are we going to pay for to operate? The police, the fire, the roads, sanitation. How much is that going to cost us? The second part is the capital budget. And that is, what are we going to build? Are we going to build new schools? Are we going to build new police stations? Are we going to build new firehouses? How many new buses are we going to buy? Things like that. But the other part of the discussion is where's the money going to come from to pay for these operations and to pay for the capital dollars. And while we get some money from the federal government and we get money from the state government, but by the way,
Philadelphians actually subsidize the state. I know a lot of people don't understand that, but Philadelphia pays more in tax dollars to the state than Philadelphia gets back from the state. Philadelphia is the economic engine for the state of Pennsylvania. It has been for the last 100 years. The surrounding counties are becoming much more of a powerful economic tool, but still, as we talk today, Philadelphia is the economic engine for the state of Pennsylvania, and projects to be so for the future. So the issues we spoke about and that you've covered so well, Larry, about how the city is going to be spending its money on anti-violence program, on other things, that part of the story is being told. But what often goes untold is, how is that money going? How are we going to pay for those type of services? And that's what I want to talk about a little bit tonight. Now, I think most people know that the real estate taxes are not going to be reassessed this year. And that's been kicked down the road for another year. And that's because the past few years have seen such large increases that people really weren't able to pay. And the only saving grace was that the council president and other members of council demanded that they raise the homestead exemption, meaning this is for real estate taxes, meaning that you don't pay taxes on the part of what the building is worth, what your home is worth. That's part of the homestead exemption. So if anyone's listening to us tonight, I'm hoping you have the homestead exemption on your real estate taxes. And if you don't, please go to the city's webpage, the revenue webpage, and sign up for the homestead exemption. It's got nothing to do with your income, has nothing to do with how long you've been in your home. It's just a way of helping people stay in their homes and not be gentrified out. That's the real estate tax. Now, the wage tax is where it gets a little trickier. And I'm going to pull up, if I can, our slides. Thank you. So if you're like me or you're like us and you're a little nerdy and you sign up for all the city's emails and you try and follow what's going on, you got a great email blast on Monday saying, City of Philadelphia announces wage tax rate decreases for workers that live in the city starting July 1st, 2023. And it says the new wage tax rate for residents of Philadelphia is 3.75%. Now, that sounds good, right? It means it's gone down. Maybe we're all saving a lot of money, but it doesn't really say how much it's going down. And it gets a little tricky because 3.75% may seem like a large amount of money, but what it really means is 0.0375 is what we pay on the wage tax. Now, there is what's called a non-resident wage tax, which means if you live in the suburbs and you work in the city and you get all the benefits of the city, the police, the fire, the streets, the sanitation, all of that, plus the city of Philadelphia heavily subsidizes the regional rail line. Few Philadelphians who live in the city ride the regional rail lines, but the city of Philadelphia pays 80% of the local match for the regional rail lines. And that's, again, a subsidy that comes from the city of Philadelphia to support the suburbs. So how much savings are we really going to see as a result of this wage tax rate decrease? Well, the old rate was 3.8398%. The new one's 3.75. So the cut that they're talking about is 0.0898% or 0.00898. Now, we're using census tract data to tell you how much that means. And it gets a little tricky because it's old. It's 2021. That's the last year that the census tract is published. And the census tract is saying the per person income. Now, this is not per family. And when they do what's called a per capita income, that includes people who aren't working. So it gets very tricky, but it's the only number that we can use as a constant. The average income, per capita income in the city of Philadelphia is $32,344. So the average savings for a person in Philadelphia is $26 a year, about $2 a month. It's not nearly enough to cover what I believe is going to be the next water rate increase, which we'll talk about in future weeks. So that's the size of it. Now, what happens is instead of the city using that money to fix the schools, to make SEPTA safer, to do whatever it wants to do, it's giving back $2 a month to people who make $32,000 a year. Of course, if you're fortunate enough to be making $250,000 a year, you get a lot more back. But the average Philadelphian on a per capita basis is going to see roughly $2.14 a month. Here's where it gets very upsetting. We call it a wage tax, but we often don't think what that means. Other cities have income taxes where people pay taxes on all of their income. In Philadelphia, we don't do that. We have a wage tax. And the significance of that is, and I'm quoting now, the wage tax is a tax on salary, wages, commissions, and other compensation. The tax applies to payments that a person receives from an employer in return for work or services. All employed Philadelphia residents owe the wage tax, regardless of where they work. Now, that seems somewhat fair, but what they don't say is there's a whole bunch of income that's called unearned income that isn't taxed by a wage tax. And that's, again, if you're very fortunate and you make your living by getting stock dividends, well, that's not taxed by a wage tax. If you make your living by collecting interest from bonds, that's not taxed. If you make your living by flipping properties, if you hold a property for 6 months and a day, there's no capital gains tax to pay. If you make your money through rents or royalties, all of those things are untaxed by the wage tax. So you don't pay any of that tax. The wage tax is kind of like a even more Republican than Republicans want. It's a tax only on earnings, only on what people go to work and get paid for. And it's a flat tax. What I mean by that is it doesn't matter how much you make. You pay the same 3.75% if you make 50,000 or if you make 100,000 or you make 500,000. Not even the income tax under President Trump, the federal income tax under President Trump, was a flat tax. Now, it's gotten flatter over the years that the Republicans have controlled the government, but it's still a graduated tax, meaning the more you pay, the more you make, the higher your interest is in keeping the society going, the higher the tax rate is. Taxes are what we pay to keep our civilization going, to keep the structure going, to keep the business relationships going. And the belief is that the better off you are, the more interest you have in keeping the status quo. If you're really struggling and you're suffering and you're poor, you have less of an interest in keeping things the way they are than if you're a billionaire. So that's why we have a graduated income tax, but not in the city of Philadelphia. Now, as I said, there are other forms of income, and that's the dividends, the interest, the royalties, the capital gains. But that's not mentioned in the email blast that the city sent out. And it wasn't mentioned by the mayor, who was thrilled with the budget. This is, again, Mayor Kenny's last budget. It's also Council President Clark's last budget. But the mayor, when he made his statement, said this budget sustains our commitments to inclusive growth by further lowering business and wage taxes, which are already the lowest they've been in decades. I'm especially proud that this budget records record levels of education funding. No investment is more effective than the investment we make in our children. And you see, in none of those statements does he talk about the school income tax. And the school income tax is on the books. It's something everyone has an obligation to pay. But we don't talk about it as a city. The mayor doesn't talk about it. The revenue department doesn't talk about it. And I don't know how people can learn about the school income tax unless they are told about it. It seems like if you keep a secret, nobody knows about it. So we don't have a list of how much is collected by the school district, for how much is collected by the school income tax. We don't know how many people pay it. We don't know what the city's collection practices are. None of that is included. Now, as we wrote about it last week, I will say the city revenue department responded to us and has started to supply some of that information. And the information shows very clearly that Philadelphia is not as poor as what we're led to believe. But what we are is a city that has a very unequal distribution of wealth. There's literally hundreds of millions of dollars that come into the city through dividends and interest and rents, but it's not shared. It's not equitable. It goes to the top 0.1%. And here I've just listed from the city's webpage wage tax. This is what the city says. And if you look it up, you'll see that there's all this information about all these taxes that you pay. But the only indication that there's a school tax is something called an income tax. And you would have to click on that to know that there is such a thing as a school tax. And if you don't know that there's a school tax, if you don't know there's a school income tax, you won't find any mention of it. Now, as I said, since we wrote about this, the Revenue Department has posted some more information, and they've graciously agreed to supply us with more information that we'll have in the weeks to come. And I'm hoping they're going to come on the air with us and discuss who's paying the income tax, how much is being collected, how much we project will be collected, and what happens to people who refuse to pay it. You know, if you're really struggling and you can't pay your real estate taxes, we have some programs for you. But at the end of the day, we're going to sell your house out from under you because you don't pay the taxes. If you're a business and you don't pay your taxes, at the end of the day, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to stop you from operating. We're going to close down your business, and we're going to sue you. Now, maybe that's happening to the people who are fortunate enough to make their living by dividends, but it's not obvious. And just as a point of interest, when you read through the Philadelphia Inquirer's coverage of the budget, they don't mention the school income tax. They don't say what the rate's going to be. Now, what we found out as a result of writing and doing research was the city's revenue department changed their webpage, and they now tell us what it's going to be. And I'm going to, again, read the quote. The new SIT, which is the school income tax rate for residents, is 3.75. It was previously 3.79. The tax is paid on certain types of unearned income. And as I said earlier, there's a couple small points that reward real estate speculators. For most people, you pay what's called, in federal taxes, you pay what's called a short-term capital gain or a long-term capital gain. The city of Philadelphia says if you're a house flipper, if you're speculating, you're buying up someone's house and waiting for the property values to go up and then flipping it, if you hold on to that house for 6 months and a day, you don't owe any taxes on what you sold the house for. And if you're fortunate enough to get zoning to change the zoning regulations, and you can now build much more, that gain, that capital gain between what the house was worth under the old zoning laws and what the house is now worth under the new zoning laws, is untaxed. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a wealth tax. The majority of people who have the type of income who would pay a school income tax are wealthy. And here's what the city says if you dig far enough into the webpage. If you're a Philadelphia resident who receives certain types of unearned income, again, stock dividends, interest, rents, royalties, short-term capital gains, you must pay school income tax. Taxable forms of unearned income include dividends, royalties, short-term rental income from a duplex, triplex, which is the primary residence of the owner, cash lottery winnings from the Pennsylvania lotteries, and some type of interest. And then you have to go further to find out whether you actually owe the tax or not. In the mayor's budget, one of the unique things, understanding that there are people who are calling for a wealth tax, is the mayor is reducing the school income tax, not by a lot, by a very small amount, but he's reducing that tax, which falls most heavily on wealthy people. And he's adding more money to the school district. So he's giving tax breaks to wealthy people, and then taking the city's operating budget, which is basically paid for with real estate taxes and wage taxes that fall most heavily on the working poor, and taking that and replacing the money he's given to the wealthy people from the schools, putting the money from working people back into the schools. But he doesn't explain why. Doesn't explain how much money the school district will lose, and he doesn't explain why he believes wealthy people need a tax cut. And that's what we're facing. And that's why I'm hoping the Revenue Department will join us in the weeks to come and talk about the school income tax. Now, again, this is an old chart, and the Revenue Department was kind enough to send this to me today, a few hours ago. But as you see, the city of Philadelphia in 2021 was collecting $55 million, almost $56 million in the school income tax. And the significance of that one is $57 million is a lot of money. But the other significance of that, if you start thinking about it, is this represents 3% or less of the dividends, royalties, capital gains that are coming into the city. So you can see how much money is coming into the city, and you can see that the city has this tremendous amount of wealth, and we just have to figure a way of making it equitable when we collect it. And that's really where we are. I want to thank the Revenue Department for reaching out to us. It was great after we wrote that they were able to get the post how much of the rate increase, how much of the rate decrease was for the school income tax, to send us that chart that showed how much money is being collected. But there are a lot more questions to be answered. And one of them is for the people who call themselves progressives and are calling for a wealth tax. I'd like to be able to ask them, well, if you want a wealth tax, why aren't you talking about the school income tax that's already on the books? Why aren't you asking who's paying it? What percentage of the people who we believe should be paying it are paying it? And what happens if you just ignore it? You don't pay it. Now, a very unique situation has come up, and that is the Revenue Department has decided to stop sending out letters asking people to file a school income tax. And I got that information right before we came on the air, so I didn't have time to put it up as a slide. I can't explain why. I'm not sure what the thinking is. Maybe they hope that everyone who's that wealthy uses an accountant, and accountants fill out all the tax forms. But it's not clear why the city isn't talking about the school income tax. When they send out an email blast saying, look, we've cut the wage tax, why isn't included in that, by the way, we've also cut the school income tax, and if you haven't filed for that, you should, and you should pay it. And why isn't there any filing anywhere that shows what's happening to the rate that's being collected? How are we collecting it? How do we know who owes it? How do we know who doesn't owe it? And can we start to discuss why, if you own something for 6 months and 1 day, why you don't have to pay any capital gains tax on it? That seems to be a huge gift when the federal government says short-term capital gains are 12 months. The city of Philadelphia is saying anything over 6 months counts as long-term capital gains, and you don't have to pay any taxes on it. And those are questions I'm hoping the Revenue Department comes on, talks with us about. And I'm hoping that the Philadelphia Inquirer, which really has some great reporters, I'm really hoping that they can focus on the school income tax and start raising these questions. Because we see that when Philadelphia Hall Monitor starts to ask these questions, we get a response. If we could get other media to start asking these questions, we may be able to get a real understanding of why the mayor believed that he had to lower the school income tax and give wealthy people a tax break, and then believe that the school district needs more money, so you had to take it out of the budget that's basically paid for by poor and working people. Again, if you're making your living by dividends, interest, rents, royalties, capital gains, you're not paying a wage tax. The only way you pay your share is through a school income tax. And if we're not collecting it, or we're cutting it back to a lower rate, and then taking the money from the general operating budget and putting it back into the school district's budget, what we're saying is regular working people are going to subsidize the tax breaks for the wealthy by putting the money back into the operating budget.
Well, Lance, thank you so much for that really concise report, because this is really important. These are the details that really don't get talked about a lot.
Right. And it gets a little confusing, and I don't have the information I need, but on the school district's agenda for tomorrow night, the school district is supposed to pass this tax. And that becomes a curiosity, because the school district of Philadelphia doesn't have any taxing abilities. Mm-hmm. And until we can get the Revenue Department on the air with us and to answer the question, well, why does the school district get to vote on what the tax rate is if the school board doesn't have a taxing power? And if the school board does have a taxing power, why doesn't that fall into the category of taxation without representation? We don't elect the school board, as happens in every other part of the state. In Philadelphia and actually Chester Upland, two majority minority school districts. We don't get to elect a school board, and those school boards don't get to set the tax rate. In all other parts of the state, the school board is elected and they set the tax rate. So if we have an unelected school board that's not allowed to set the tax rate, it's not clear to me why they're voting as an agenda item. The school board is voting as an agenda item Thursday on the tax rate. And again, we hope to get the Revenue Department on to answer some of these questions. We hope to get the Philadelphia Inquirer and WHYY and some of the other media that does a great job in the city to join us in asking these questions, because it's partly the dollars. It really is. The money matters. But it's also a question of equity. Why is it that we would give a tax break to the people making their living, cutting coupons for interest, making their living by collecting bonds or interest or dividends? And why would we subsidize their tax cut by taking money from the people who are going to work every day, whether it's loading trash trucks or it's fixing the roads or it's maintaining the infrastructure of the city? Why are we asking those people to subsidize the tax breaks for the very wealthy? And those questions of tax equity, I believe, are critical for a city that says we want to be fair and we want to be equitable and we want to overcome the past years of racism and oppression that have led us with a city that has an incredibly unequal distribution of wealth. Again, people like to say we are the poorest big city in America. I'm not sure that's true. What I think is true is that we are the city that has one of the least equitable distribution of wealth. And part of that is our bidding process. When we go ahead and we give out a contract, we may ask about the racial makeup of the owners of the company, but we don't ask whether there's profit sharing for the workers. We don't ask if the workers own the company. We don't do the things that we could do to make the equitable distribution of wealth fairer in the city of Philadelphia.
And that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. I don't know that you can be the poorest big city in America and one of the wealthiest cities in America at the same time, right? One of those things can't be true. And the truth is, we're very wealthy. We just don't, there's no distribution of this.
Right. And I'm hoping when we get the new census tract data, we'll be able to add to this story. But if we're fortunate, the Revenue Department will send us their spokesperson. They'll go over this with us. They'll be able to correct where I'm wrong. They'll be able to point us to a different direction. Obviously, I don't think I'm wrong, because if I did, I wouldn't say it. But there's always the possibility that I've missed something, that there's something I'm conveying that's not the full story. But to me, it's very clear. We've cut taxes for the wealthy, and we've taken money out of the operating budget for the city that's paid for out of real estate taxes and wage taxes, and replaced the money in the school district.
And, you saw this in council. The last session was last week, and they voted on the budget. And you had Councilmember Jamie Gaudier say, I'm not going to vote for this budget because I don't like these tax reductions. And and the counter argument that was provided is, well, we're taking it from the surplus. And her argument was, you're not. You're just taking money away from the budget to give people $2 a month. And I don't understand how. I still don't understand how that makes sense.
Well, again, hopefully we'll get some answers and we'll keep people posted. Thank people for watching Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 FM and on Comcast Channel 6 and Fios 29. Hope to see Denise next week with a fuller report of Brooklyn, the most exciting city people are leaving.
And we just want to say happy birthday to our friend Vincent Thompson. Today's his birthday, 39 years old. So we'll hopefully have him on soon.
Right. Hopefully he'll be spending it at the Phillies.